Hello, everyone, and welcome to Neptunes. This is a series of podcasts on National Education Policy 2020 and the National Curriculum Framework. In these series of podcasts, we are looking at demystifying and decoding the NEP 2020 and also looking at innovative educational practices. This is a policy change that is really bringing across a lot of transformation in the educational landscape of our country. I'm your host, Anju Shazo, and I have with me today Mrs. Anita Karwal. Welcome, Anita, to the podcast.
Thank you.
Mrs. Anita Karwal has been formerly the Secretary of Education of School Literacy with the Government of India with the Ministry of Education. It is under her tenure that the NEP 2020 was released, Nipun Bharat guidelines, and also the alignment of the Samagra Shiksha. In addition, the National Curriculum Framework was also developed. So we have with us somebody who can really give us deep insights into the policy and also help us understand it better. And this is from a really authentic source of information because she has been one of the major architects of this particular massive path-breaking policy. So we would like to begin immediately. And as we begin, I would like, first of all, to request you, Anita, to give us some introduction to the NEP. What would you like to say at the start?
I would like to say that this is actually the first comprehensive policy which has come out in our country after a gap of 34 years. So, the last policy, let us look at the context in which it was there. The last policy, there was no internet which was mainstreamed. Everybody didn't have access to internet. There were no smartphones.
Right.
There was no artificial intelligence.
Absolutely.
There were so many things which were not there. The world then was very different from the world now. And while the world has evolved so much, so the policy also needs to evolve. And that's what the NEP is all about.
Great. Let's now have a look at two images. The first image that we have here is, as you can see, a bunch of children sitting on wooden desks and on wooden benches in a linear manner. And this is, I think, something that most of our viewers will recognize because all of us have practically studied in a similar manner. And in this particular seating arrangement, which is linear, you can see that there's no collaboration possible, there's no dialogue possible amongst children, and children are pretty static. They're sitting and they're just seated and they're recipients of some sort of information that is imparted by
passive learning.
completely passive. So we need to now, I think, shift to a new way of learning. And I thought, let us have a look at the image which has been put, the cover page of the National Curriculum Framework. So if we look at that, I think it's a telling image and something that is uh, self-explanatory because you can see that, first of all, the children are not inside the classroom. And I thought that's such a lovely change.
Absolutely. And look at the joy on their faces because
Yeah.
they are not inside the classroom.
Yeah,
And every child here is doing something different.
absolutely.
And the child is actually owning the learning process out here, though the teacher is there as a facilitator.
Right, right.
Yeah.
So yeah, I see that. I see in this image, the children are outside, they're doing different things. They are working in groups. I can see that the teacher is part of the group also. It is not a one-way traffic of information which is imparted. I can also see different modes of learning. So children are exploring, they are drawing, they are making something, they are playing, they're observing. Also, there's a little puppy there which has seen this image.
Yes.
And I think that's nice because it brings in the entire real context of school lives with our animals, plants, flora and fauna.
So the way we have been teaching so far, the real life context is actually divorced from education right now. But what we have here is when children are connecting back to their real life and understanding that learning can take place like this. And you can see a tiny guy there who's actually with a magnifying glass doing research.
Yes.
So what NEP is trying to say is that children are inherently curious.
Yes.
And we have to nurture their curiosity rather than kill it by
Yes.
just sitting in linear lines inside the
yeah.
classroom.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think what we also see here, which will be, of course, explored further in this podcast, is that they are all doing different things and they're learning together, but it's also not just disciplinary learning. So it's not like you're learning one thing at a time, you're learning only one subject, etc. You're learning a number of things during some activities that children are engaged in. So I think that's the first big message as we begin our talks on NEP. So let's see, I think there are several core principles of NEP 2020. And I think today's podcast is one of the big ones where we need to go through at least all the main principles. So we're going to start with the first one. And let's just unpack that together. So what, the NEP talks about holistic education. And I think it's a much touted word. And I think it's also has got a lot of different connotations. Everybody's talking about holistic education. But what is it really? So I think we can begin by that. Could you tell us what is holistic education?
Yes. So, UNESCO, way back in the early 80s, perhaps, started talking about holistic education. And their approach was that when we fully activate the various aspects of a human being or of a human being's personality, and the aspects could be anything, it could be emotional, it could be physical, it could be cognitive. When we fully activate that, then the person is in a holistic learning mode. What the NEP has done has gone a step further, and it describes holistic learning as an approach which aims to develop all the faculties of the human being, whether it is intellectual, whether it is ethical, aesthetic, emotional, physical, cognitive, all aspects. We aim to develop them. So, school education should become the facilitator for developing a child holistically. So, we are considering the whole child as the person who comes to school. This child is not leaving her mind in the school and leaving her physical body and her emotional body at home. She comes as a whole child. That is the
I think that's really wonderful. And I think also that it is also giving a focus or giving value, I would say, to different aspects of a child and the unique gifts also.
Yes.
So far, traditional education has not respected the diversity that we have in our classrooms. It has given value to only particular kind of, let's say, intelligence or particular kind of talent. So let's say if you've got Priya, who is wonderful in sports, but is struggling to read. So then we would have a teacher, if the NEP is implemented properly, then she would look at the linguistic diversity and go and use her mother tongue and help this child progress while giving value to her sports education as well. Or if you have a boy, let's say Rahul, who is very good in art and design, but is struggling in, let's say, mathematical concepts, then the teacher would bring in, let's say, rangoli making or some other artistic activities and merge that with his interests.
Exactly, that is the point. And with the help of these different innovative methodologies, we have to first help the child achieve foundational literacy and numeracy, which is the second principle, major principle of the NEP. So every child is actually expected to achieve foundational literacy and numeracy before reaching grade 3 or by grade 3. And the whole idea behind this is that during this time period, the child's brain is actually growing at a very fast pace. And we are tapping that, neuroscience says that we are tapping the growth of the brain and in the process helping the child pick up literacy and numeracy. Unless the child learns to read, the child will not be able to read to learn. So it is very important to develop FLN. So that is the second most important principle.
Yes, I think I would like to add to that, because this foundational numeracy and literacy, the pedagogy is also very important in it, because what happens at that age, at the foundational stage, is that children are actually, they need to learn in concrete ways.
Yes.
So that the conceptual understanding is actually going through a certain number of activities that children are doing. Then other thing that you mentioned is about the neurons and the growth of the brain at that age. So children need to be exposed to a really wide range of things that they can do.
Wide range of stimulations, wide range of interactions. And these have to be positive. Negative stimulations, negative interactions actually make the growth regressive. I mean, the child will not be able to grow cognitively.
Right.
Yes.
Right. So that's also linked to the self-esteem of the child.
Yes.
So all the foundation of the adult life, and I think all this fear of failure that sets in also in so many of our
Yes.
children, because then they learn not to do something or take risks because they're scared of failing. So this is going hand in hand with the idea of exploration, discovery, doing different things from a very young age, which is really the foundational stage.
Yes.
So the focus has to be a lot on actual hands-on concrete learning, so that the child is actually learning by doing different things and learning joyfully.
And that is what is termed as play-based learning
Mm,
in the
mm.
national curriculum framework.
Right.
So entire focus of the foundational years
Mm.
from the age 3 to 8
Mm.
is that there will be only play-based learning
Mm.
and there will be no assessment. The child is going to be observed.
That is just so wonderful. Music to our ears.
Yes.
I think the third principle, I would say, of NEP is also that it dismantles the traditional barriers which have been between different subjects and disciplines.
That's right. In fact, we used to use the term in CBSE particularly, extracurricular, co-curricular. All those terms have now gone. There is nothing extra, there's nothing co. Everything is curricular. Whether it is sports, whether it is vocational education, everything is curricular.
Yes, and I think it's also, when I was a student, I would always wonder why, when the bell rings, I have to suddenly shift my mind from a wonderful story that I'm reading or I'm engaged in, and then suddenly go into mathematics and suddenly to science. And none of these things have any connection amongst each other. So I think missing out on the connections has been very detrimental to human development, because in life it's not like that.
Yeah, so that is called multidisciplinarity in the NEP, and that is a part of this approach where the barriers are being broken down.
Right, right. So I think this is a very strong point of the
Yes.
NEP
And
2020.
if we related to this is the fourth principle, which is contextualization of the learning process. So whatever the child is learning, if the child doesn't understand the context and if it is not drawn from her context, the child is not going to be able to connect to that learning. So if a child is in Gujarat, for example, and we are telling the child about the Himalayas and the snow mountains, etc., and the entire book is about that, the child is not going to be able to connect. The child needs to know about the desert, the coast, to be able to connect to the learning.
Yeah. So I think if we look at the traditional curriculums and the way we have learned previously, I feel that we were disconnected from ourselves, we were disconnected from our communities, and we were disconnected with our environments.
Absolutely.
So and even the knowledge body was fragmented into silos. So there was a disconnection between that. So in fact, that is what creates such a great sense of alienation amongst the population.
Yes. And there is a stage at which the child is able to learn beyond the context. But there are stages, the earlier stages, where contextualization is the only way to make the child engaged in the learning process.
And also make sense. As human beings, we want to make sense of learning. It has.
Yes.
So if it is just something which is not even my context, which I don't understand, then that is how we tend to then go to rote learning.
Yes.
If we have to move away from rote learning, then it has to be contextualized, which makes sense, and it is connected. Not only contexts bring in the connect also, I think. Yes. I think one more radical shift, I would say, in the which we could call the fifth principle maybe in NEP, is that we are making then the shift from this rote learning precisely to a more practical approach, a more hands-on approach in learning. Could we say that?
Absolutely. The whole idea is to do more practical work, to do more experiential learning, to do more project-based learning. The idea is that the agency of learning remains with the child, and the whole learning process is child-centered. And that will ensure that this rote learning process goes away. Otherwise, presently, it is a one-way street. There is a chalk and a board and the teacher is just teaching on that and the children are passively looking at it and simply trying to rote learn it.
Right.
Not trying to understand, not trying to apply it in real life, not understanding the practical aspect.
Yes. I think so far schools have been working towards examination-driven learning rather than learner-centric learning, which is what do I need to learn which would be meaningful to me in my life, which would help me deal with life's challenges, which would help me become more resilient, which would help me understand myself and my strengths and weaknesses. So I think all those things haven't been there.
It hasn't. I recall when we were in school, so every chapter which was taught, it was taught in this manner. We will leave this portion because this may not come in the exams. We will do this portion because it's going to come in the exams. So we have always been teaching to test.
Yes.
We have not been ensuring that the child learns what the child needs for leading a very productive life, as an adult.
Absolutely. So then I think that would be the sixth principle.
Yes. The
which
pedagogy.
is the pedagogy. Right. So how would we, I think, reimagine the pedagogy would be the larger question, because that is what, for the first time, I think there is a policy that is giving such a lot of scope to bring in new ways of learning for children. And which means that children move away from that static, passive mode to becoming engaged, active, involved, and where all the senses are engaged in multisensorial ways. I think that is a big
That
shift.
is the idea, and this shift is unique because, Anju, there have been two policies before this. And none of the policies actually talked about experiential learning, project-based learning, storytelling-based learning, or art-integrated, sports-integrated learning. None of them spoke about this. This is for the first time that this is being spoken about, and I'm glad to tell you that most of the states in the country are seized of this, and it is still early, but they're trying to, get training modules, build the capacities of their teachers on this.
Right.
Because without doing that, we really can't go ahead.
Of course. And I think when you go towards experiential learning and through project-based learning, etc., children are going to also develop all the skills which are required.
Yes.
Because it will necessarily encompass a range of different concepts and competencies across subjects. So I think it's really the way forward, which is in sync with the current times in which we live, which are very disruptive.
Absolutely. And linked to that is actually the seventh principle. The pedagogy is linked to the assessment. The seventh principle is about reimagining assessments to make them more formative and less summative. And so far, we have understood formative assessment as anything which ranges from a class test to perhaps a test which is administered centrally. But formative assessment is not at all that.
Absolutely. That's
formative assessment is something where the teacher herself is empowered to check while she's teaching where her students stand in various ways and then give constructive feedback and then iterate her teaching process accordingly to ensure that the children pick up the learning standard or the competence.
And that is exactly where the pedagogy is linked to the assessment as well.
Yes.
It is assessment as learning.
As learning, absolutely.
So then you have, let's say you've got a storytelling session, storytelling pedagogy, you've got arts integrated or sports integrated education. So through that, the teacher is constantly in a process of giving feedback. The child is also self-reflecting. The peers are also giving the feedback to each other. So what is happening? I don't need to wait at the end of the term for a test to know how to improve. I'm improving while I'm learning. And I'm learning while I'm improving.
Yes.
I think the other point also about this testing thing, and I think it would be, again, always important. I keep asking you this question practically. I think I'll do it in every episode to drill this into a lot of teachers and probably parents is that we don't need unit tests.
No, we absolutely do not need.
The government is not suggesting that it is not part of the NEP. It can be there as just one of the ways, but largely it is focusing on formative assessments as a way to learn.
And formative assessment will have to be learnt by teachers. It is not something which is in the form of a unit test or a class test. It is in several formats. If a child is doing a role play in class, it is a formative assessment. If a child goes home and makes a magazine, let us say on coastal areas on India, the child has done some formative assessment. So it is the way we ask the child to do work or to represent the knowledge that the child has gathered, and also how we assess it. Formative assessment is a process which is done while teaching.
Yes, exactly.
While teaching.
It is not at the end of it.
No,
it is
not.
During.
Yes.
And it is this continual way of discussions, feedback, and the child gains a deeper insight into whatever he or she is doing. So, of course, we're going to have an entire episode or episodes on assessments later on, but this was just one of the principles that we needed to speak about. So, let's go on to then one more
To the
eighth principle.
Yeah. So the eighth principle is a major emphasis on 21st century skills. And 21st century skills is something which we have been increasingly hearing about in the last 5 to 7 years, particularly when it is being discussed in the World Economic Forum, etc. And particularly with the advent of artificial intelligence, etc. But 21st century skills is something which can be a part of pedagogy and can be a part of assessment as well, formative assessment as well. So there is a huge emphasis on that in the NEP.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that will also help them, many of these skills which are spoken about. And I think most schools today are familiar with the idea that children need to be engaged in critical thinking, analysis, deeper reflections, even mindfulness. All of these have become, these skills are not new actually.
They are not.
But I think it's the importance of it in today's time now that we really need to focus on them. So I think coming to the next principle, which is a very fundamentally important part of NEP, is I think inclusion.
Yes. Inclusion actually has gathered a very wide meaning under the NEP. It is no longer limited to gender or to disability.
Right.
So, of course, that is included. I mean, inclusion means getting more girls into schools, getting more transgender into schools, or ensuring that all disabled children have access to good quality education. Inclusion also means access to good quality education as per NEP, which means taking the medium of instruction which the child understands. So multilingualism, looking at retention, mainstreaming out of school children so that they don't stay out of school and they come back to school. Ensuring midday meals, which is now called PM Poshan. These are all part of inclusion. So inclusion has a very wide meaning now, and it is all related to, at the end of the day, what quality education the child gets and whether the child is learning and learning outcomes are good.
I think what I love about the idea of inclusion, and when it is touching a diverse population, different kinds of abilities, whether it is social class or caste or religions or linguistic diversities or abilities, it's a fact that your classroom becomes so much more diverse.
Yeah.
And when the classroom becomes diverse, you get a multiplicity of views, viewpoints, perspectives. So the debates are richer, the discussions are richer. Of course, the pedagogy has to encourage that.
Yes.
And that's where we're going to be discussing the mindsets and the roles of teachers.
Yes.
But I think it's a wonderful thing. And I think that also brings into the next principle, which is an important one.
It's highly related,
Yes.
actually.
Yeah.
So the next principle is the NEP's recognition of the transformative role of technology. And actually, technology has a huge role to play in inclusion. So whether we make textbooks available bilingually and whether we make it available in the public domain, whether we have assistive devices for disabled students, whether we have content in different languages, whether we are able to have audio books, for example, for visually impaired children. So a lot of this comes in. Aside from that, the fact that technology is going to stay with us, it's not going away. Integrating aspects of technology in the teaching learning process,
Right.
and learning about technology itself. This has been given space in the NEP, and its role has been recognized as a very significant role.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think this is almost like I would say, paradox, because many of us have always read and felt that technology might become the great divide between, let's say, rural and urban areas, or people have access to technology and you don't have access to technology. Is there going to be a new class of people who are going to emerge through the digital divide? Those who are very well versed with it, those who don't have access to it. But what you're saying is that it is important to use technology to provide a greater access.
Yeah.
And also to have a greater access to different kinds of resources.
Yes.
So technology can become actually a tool.
It can, and it's a process. I mean, we cannot say that 100% schools in India do have access to technology, but majority do have. It's a process. We will slowly get there.
Yes.
And the fact that we are recognizing that it is important to get there
Right.
is the first step.
Yes. Yeah. I think that's an important point to
Yeah,
make.
yeah.
There's also the 11th principle, which I would really want you to shed light on, which is about the role of languages and multilingualism. Because this has been, there's a lot of debate going around it, of course, we know. But maybe you could just talk a bit about that.
Yeah, so this is very interesting. What the NEP as well as the NCF, they both talk about promoting multilingualism, and there is a scientific reason behind it. Unless the child learns a language, the child is not able to do any other subject, any other discipline. There is no question. And children are best placed to learn multiple languages because their brains are wired that way. They have that plasticity in the brain that they
Right.
can learn that.
Right.
So, what the National Curriculum Framework says is that, okay, when they are in the foundational stage, that is the stage they need to know one language which is closest to them and which could be their medium of instruction, which is their mother tongue or their regional language, etc.
Right.
So, they learn one language. When they go to the preparatory stage, when grades 3 to 5,
Yeah.
then the second language is added. So, it's a very it's a process. It's a hierarchy. It's not as if suddenly children are going to learn too many languages. The second language which is added at the preparatory stage need not be a native language. It could be a non-native language also, which could be English also, for example. When they go to the middle stage, that is the first time the third language is added, and which has to be again native to India. It could be any language. And this 3 languages continues till grade 10. So for 5 years, from grade 6 to grade 10, there will be 3 languages. 11th and 12th, again, it's 2 languages. The idea is that children get to know the language, they learn about the literature, they learn about the culture attached to that language, understand the diversity, the traditional practices, and they also learn to appreciate diversity and appreciate different kinds of literature, different kinds of ideas, etc. That is the idea.
I think, given the fact that India is home to so many languages in the world,
Yes.
this is one of our major strengths.
Yes.
And I think Indians have probably done well abroad because they had a background in languages.
Yes.
And children have a capacity to learn multiple languages when they're young. And I think as an educator, whatever research shows is that children actually have a capacity to learn orally many languages.
Yeah.
So if children are taught at the oral, in an oral manner, at least different Indian languages or other languages, it's great. And they could be taught how to read and write a fewer number of languages.
Yeah.
One at a time.
That's right. And Anju, these days, if you look at the OTT channels, now there is no question of us only watching Hindi films or only watching English films. There's such good films coming from all over the country, whether it's Assamese or whether it is Odia or whether it is a South Indian film, and we are watching them.
Right.
And we are loving them.
Yes.
So the barriers are now broken. So there is no point in talking about barriers anymore. So yes, and it should be the choice of the state government,
the school and
the child.
the context actually brings in. Yeah, that's lovely. And well, let me now come to the 12th principle, which is really very, very important for me. I think I was so moved when I understood that empathy, mental health and physical health and well-being are now fundamentally a part of an educational policy.
Yes.
This, I think, is the biggest gift that this policy is given to our young children, because this is going to be a major issue in the world, actually.
Absolutely. And what is so interesting is that the National Curriculum Framework, it talks about beginning the teaching and learning process with socio-emotional learning. The child has to be made has to feel safe, has to be made comfortable, has to feel engaged, has to feel joyful, should not be hungry. So many things. And all these things form the basis of a good engagement in the teaching learning process. That recognition is here, and also helping children overcome various issues that they may have. It is the job of the teachers and of the schools of our system to ensure that children have the best learning experience. For that, whatever we need to do for their mental health and well-being, physical health and well-being, we need to do that.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
and related to this, Anju, I must say, it is said that if you want good mental health and well-being, indulge yourself in anything that is creative.
That's
And
true.
that's why music and art,
Yes.
sports, etc., it is so important.
Well, it's always very therapeutic. I mean, if you paint or draw or dance, so why aren't we using it in the classroom?
Yes.
And in fact, if we combine these, then what happens? Learning becomes almost a therapeutic experience.
Absolutely.
And you know, when you were talking about mental health, uh, it's just a no-brainer, right? That you cannot teach an unhappy child anything.
Yes.
So why? And somehow, because of the pressures of examinations and very false pressures,
Yeah.
even in young classes, I mean, I do understand that there are pressures which will come at the end of the schooling when they have to prepare for competitive exams or go to universities, etc. But you know, young children are being given unit tests and they are coming under pressure and they're falling sick.
Yeah.
So schools are actually creating psychosomatic disorders because of the fear. So instead of teaching children through fear, let's just teach them through joy.
Yeah. That's the idea.
Yes, and thanks to the NEP for that. What about the 13th
The
principle?
13th principle is about making vocational education mainstream.
Mhm.
So, what happens till now is that vocational education is not compulsory. You pick it up if you want to, and it also doesn't have that status. Here, what we have done is that from the preparatory stage, through something called the world around us, the whole idea of what are vocations, what are occupations, what can you do when you grow up, what is the importance of a particular profession or occupation, etc., is introduced to the child from grade 3 onwards. There is a lot of vocational exposure in grade 6 to 8 through bagless days, etc.
Mm.
And 9th, 10th, it is mandatory for every child to do one discipline, one area of vocational education.
Mm.
So, and of course, in 11th, 12th, they have the option to pick up more than one area, but in 9th, 10th, it is mandatory. So, this is something which is going to help the child decide on the future, you know, or their employment, whether they want to be a job seeker or a job giver, where would they like to go, etc. So, this is a very good foundation for them.
I don't know why vocational education always got, you know, kind of a treated as a second-rate thing.
Yeah.
Because actually, the word vocation comes from vocare, the Latin vocare, which means to find your calling. And it's really that, you know, if children are given exposure through different things that they can do, they'll find things that they like to do or they don't like to do. So I think the purpose of education is precisely to help children find their calling.
Yeah.
And for that, vocational education is the best gift we can give them.
Absolutely. There's no better gift. You are absolutely right.
So then, of course, who else can help children achieve this than the teachers?
Yes.
And I think that brings us to the 14th principle,
Yes.
which are the teachers are actually catalysts in this transformational process for children.
Yes. And you see, in India, we have a very good pupil teacher ratio. If you look at the overall pupil teacher ratio, it is, I wouldn't say it is the best, but it is fairly okay. And we are maintaining it as per the Right to Education Act. The problem is that teachers' capacities need to be built. Whenever we introduce something, we need to do very, very good training of teachers.
Right.
And that is something, if we take up, it will be very easy to implement.
May I ask a question here? What is actually the ratio of the which is recommended in the?
So it is according to RTE, it is 1:30 for elementary level, which is up to 8 standard, and then it is 1:35 at the.
So actually, ideally, a school should not have children beyond 30 in a classroom. A classroom should have
Yes.
maximum.
Let me correct myself. It is 1:30 up to grade 5 and 1:35 from 6, 7, 8.
Okay.
And in 9, 10, 11, 12, CBSE has mandated 1:40.
Okay.
Yeah. So that is supposed to be the thing, but of course we do have some challenges at some places. But I want to bring to your notice a very interesting study which was done by John Hattie.
Okay.
It is called Visible Learning. What he did was he collected all possible research work done on positive impact on student learning from across the world. And then he made an index of what are those things which impact most positively on a student's learning process. And he found that the number one thing that helps a student learn is teacher efficacy.
Wow.
Yeah. So imagine, and he picked up these researches, hundreds, thousands of these researches from across the world, and he found that it is teacher efficacy. So yes, they are the catalyst. They are actually the oxygen of the whole education system.
And I think there's been so much of debate about, what's really a good school. Is it really the infrastructure? Is it this and that? But actually, it's actually about good classroom practice, and that comes down really to the teacher.
Yeah.
And if you look at the Gurukul system, where we have images of the teacher sitting under a tree, the guru sitting there, and the children around, and they're learning in a natural environment. They're learning with each other and with the teacher. So it always laid emphasis on the teacher's ability to connect with the child. All the foundational years and later on, we've read so many stories where a child's life is shaped because of the one word the teacher said, or the encouragement that the teacher, gave to a child when the child was drawing or doing some sports or something, and saying, "Beta, tum kar sakte ho, you can do this, go ahead."
This reminds me of the COVID days. Of course, those are very, very challenging days, very difficult days. But teachers across the country, the way they innovated, because they could not bring the children to school. So teachers, there was one teacher who used a sound system to tell stories every day. He would go to the panchayat room and start telling stories, and the whole village would hear, including the children. There's another teacher who started outdoor classes so that they could sit at distance and social distancing would happen. There is one teacher who used the walls of houses as blackboard. He painted it
I
black
remember
in
seeing that.
front.
Yes.
So imagine, teachers are actually major innovators, and there's nobody better than them to implement the NEP.
And I think it's time that in India, like in some other countries, we do give back the status to teachers.
Yes.
Because they are the people who are transforming and creating the next generation, shaping the society. So I hope that through the NEP, this is going to happen more and more.
Yes.
I think one of the powerful things that the NEP has also done is, because it's the process of decolonization, moving away from something that India inherited as an education system, is to actually remember and recall our own past and traditions.
Yes.
And to reconnect with that.
So actually, there are 2 or 3 cross-cutting themes in the NEP, and one of them is this: the knowledge of India. So knowledge of India is a theme which is integrated across the grades from K to 12, from preschool to grade 12.
Right.
And the idea is that to make education more contextualized, to have a pride in the nation, to develop citizenship values, it is important to integrate knowledge of India. And that's what the NEP recommends.
Yes, and I think one of the ways would be really to look at all the things that we've been doing traditionally, but also connecting that to the reasons why were we doing this.
Yes.
Because much of, if you look at even something as simple as, let us say, use of spices that we have, what we're eating, we're doing certain things. This is all knowledge systems which will otherwise die down if we don't actually make it explicit in our educational system.
Yes.
So there is one entire parallel body of knowledge systems that continues through mothers and families, through celebration of festivals, etc. But the older traditional schooling system did not integrate that into the mainstream. And I think what the NEP is telling us to do, or at least opening the door on that, is to integrate and give value to those knowledge systems.
Exactly. That is the idea. It's not as if it is about reading certain texts, etc.
Right.
It is about understanding where you come from.
Right.
And what is the significance of that.
Yes, to take an example, in our school, children collected all the dadi maa ke, recipes which were linked for good health. For example, if you have cold or cough, seasonal change, then you should be eating this, or you should be not eating this. So things like that. And children collected that and they made their own little booklet. And I thought that's such a good way of preserving the knowledge which is there in all our, families.
Yeah.
Another aspect, I think, of NEP, which is very important in this 21st century technology-driven age, is, of course, something to do with values and ethics.
Yes, that is the second cross-cutting theme, actually. That everything we teach, it should have an integrated part where the child is also able to learn values and ethics. It can be taught through ethical dilemmas, it can be taught through examples, it can be taught through literature, through various ways, and through experiential learning. As we were talking before we started the podcast, it is very important for children to be able to analyze what they are learning, to be able to, imbibe those values.
Right. I think we have to move away from that moral science classroom
Yes.
teaching, because it doesn't really make sense. I mean, you can learn it by heart, but it is only in the real life when you're applying things, when you're doing things, that you'll actually understand what's the meaning of this. What kind of decision should I take? And what did I take? And reflect on that. So I think this is an important aspect,
Yes.
and it should be done through the activities or projects and linked to real life. Otherwise, it wouldn't make sense.
Absolutely.
Right. So, I mean, we've covered good ground in all the core principles. Of course, there's always this big skeptic person always somewhere saying, well, policies come and policies go.
Yeah.
And again, this is a wonderful policy, or maybe not, whatever. There are people who would not agree on that. But what about the challenges? How is it going to be implemented? Is it too utopian, for example? So I think maybe we can look at some of the challenges in that.
See, normally in a typical policy implementation, when people talk about challenges, they will talk about resources, they will talk about human resources, financial resources, they will talk about logistics, infrastructure, etc. But let me tell you, in this policy, the core principles, whether it is of pedagogy, of assessment, of integrating skills, etc., doesn't really require a huge amount of resources. It does require teacher capacity building, but not this huge amount of resources, because it is a shift. We are shifting from rote-based learning to competency-based learning, learning which is based on very, very innovative pedagogies and innovative forms of assessment, etc. That shift does not really require resources, but it requires capacity building. It requires a lot of collaboration. And I think the first step is capacity building of teachers. And before that, the first step is understanding the NEP, understanding which parts are crucial and which parts can be implemented straight away.
Right. I think there are a lot of myths around that, isn't it? One of the myths of implementation that I keep hearing is, oh, well, experiential learning, that takes a lot of time. So who's got the time? And how are we going to complete the syllabus? We've got such a lot of syllabus to complete. And I think I want you to just talk about that. What is syllabus? Because as I understand it, the syllabus are the competencies today, not just a single
syllabus
to learn
is
by
not
heart.
textbooks. Syllabus is not an index of chapters in your textbooks. Now the syllabus is your learning standards. So for every stage, learning standards have been prescribed. Those learning standards do not have to be achieved in a particular grade. They have to be achieved across the stage, anytime during the stage. So if a child is not able to get something in grade 3, the child still has grade 4 and 5 in the preparatory stage to achieve it. So that whole myth about not being able to do it, I think would have to go, because now the learning standards have been made very small in number and to be achieved across a stage, not across a grade.
So it will be across the foundational stage, the
preparatory, middle, or secondary.
And that gives you actually ample time,
Lot of leeway.
yes, so it's also like what you rightly said. It's not just about rote learning from textbooks. The competencies are what are important.
Yes.
How you do those competencies in a classroom is up to you. You may use the textbook, you may use other resources to fulfill those competencies.
And Anju, I think we should do later on one podcast only on learning standards, what are competencies.
Right. I think that would be very important to define them. I mean, to explain them. Yes, and I think I wanted to add about this. This whole also myth about time. I wanted to say that actually, when you're doing transdisciplinary or interdisciplinary work, children are doing an activity, they're not learning only one thing at a time. In traditional learning, you are in subject silos. So you're learning mathematics and English, then whatever. But when you're doing an activity and you're involved in, you engage with hands-on activities, you're actually learning multiple things, and you are actually learning several competencies across more than one subject domain. It may be 2 to 3
21st century
skills as well. And because it's hands-on, practical, multisensorial, children are actually integrating it. They're not learning by heart. So you don't even need to do any revision.
Yes.
So, when we talk about time, you're actually saving time. Actually, you're going much faster because the children are learning better and they're integrating it better and they're understanding it better. So I think that's one thing that I wanted to, just busting one of the myths. So I think as we come to the end of maybe this podcast, it will be interesting to see what is it immediately that teachers can do. What is it that we can start off by making one small change in our classrooms?
Why don't you give them a takeaway challenge, Anju?
Okay. I was thinking that, something that the children and all schools generally do is celebrate festivals. Festivals are joyous for people, it's great for communities. And there is so much of learning in a festival because you have food, you have seasonal change, you have storytelling, you have artwork, you have things like fasting. Why do people fast during festivals? So, actually, one of the things that teachers could do is to look at which is the next festival coming and look at what are the different subject competencies that can be learned through by celebrating that festival. That's one thing. And I thought one other simple thing that we could do was move out of the classroom. Please just go out and do an outdoor activity with your kids.
Yeah. And while indoors, another simple thing they could do is change the seating plan. Make it a more collaborative seating plan where children can sit in groups and learn together.
Easily done.
Easily, yes.
And that is going to change such a lot for the children. And that brings us back to the image that we shared within the beginning of this podcast, which is from linear seating. We can really go into group work outside, doing things outside the classroom or inside the classroom in group setting. So I think that's really wonderful. I hope that viewers have enjoyed this podcast. I'd like to thank you very much, Anita, for this one. And also, please stay tuned to Neptunes and please follow us on our social media handles to join in these conversations and transforming every classroom one at a time. Thank you very much for joining. This is Anju signing off. Namaste.